Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
In the end, this light edge inscription was obtained by the person in room number 7 for 1,600,000 gold. The sounds of surprise rose and fell within the hall. The guest in room number 1 actually didn't make a move. Yeah, truly strange. The light edge inscription is a great item. Even though it's a disposable item, compared to the gold fur mouse, it's much more practical. Duanling Tian couldn't help but snicker when he heard the discussions of these people. Light edge inscription? Not to mention he paid no regard to such an inscription. Even if he wanted one, he could refine it himself. Moreover, the cost would at most be 3 million silver, or 30,000 gold. As far as he was concerned, that person in room number 7 was simply a sucker for spending 1,600,000 gold to buy this light edge inscription. I never would have imagined that the art of inscription has declined to such a state. A mere light edge inscription is able to be sold at such a high price. Duanling Tian sighed rather emotionally, and he couldn't help but think in his heart. When the time comes that he's so poor that he's unable to keep the pot boiling, he can also sell some inscriptions, and it would absolutely be an extremely profitable transaction. In next to no time, the voice of the old man on the auction platform sounded again, and his voice was slightly excited. Everyone, the next thing to be auctioned is the last auction item for today's auction. According to our Ma Clan auction house's original plan, the light edge inscription should have been the final auction item. And the current final auction item is something a guest entrusted to our auction house to auction out at the last minute. As the old man finished speaking, his face was slightly flushed red. This scene also caused all the people in the hall to become curious. What exactly was it that caused the old man to be so excited? Old man Ma, stop beating around the bush. Hurry up and say what item it is. Exactly. It's already the final auction item. Hurry up and finish the auction. The entire auction hall was clamorous for a moment. Everyone was filled with interest towards the auction item that the Ma Clan auction house placed at the end. They were clear in their hearts that according to the Ma Clan auction house's usual practice, this final auction item's worth would absolutely not be inferior to the gold fur mouse and light edge inscription. In room number 1. Scoundrel, I never expected the Ma Clan auction house to place your origin strengthening pill as the final auction item. Li Fei looked at Duanling Tian, and her beautiful eyes were filled with curiosity. I wonder how much the final bid price for the origin strengthening pill with 90% or above purity that you refined will be. Duanling Tian had a face full of anticipation as well. We'll soon know how much it can be auctioned for. In next to no time, under the gazes of everyone present, the old man on the auction platform lifted up the red cloth from the tray in the young girl's hand. A pill bottle appeared before everyone's eyes. A medicinal pill again? Instantly, the hall exploded out in an uproar. Could it be a void advancement pill? Possibly. Only a void advancement pill has the worth to be placed as the final auction item. If it's a void advancement pill, its price would easily surpass the earlier gold fur mouse. After all, this is a medicinal pill that would allow a half-step void stage martial artist to directly break through to the void prying stage. For a time, many people guessed that it was a void advancement pill that was within the pill bottle the old man held in his hand. As far as they were concerned, only a void advancement pill had the qualification to become the final auction item. Void advancement pill? Now even Duanling Tian had no choice but to admire the imagination of the crowd of people in the hall. The old man raised his hand to make the people in the hall quiet down. Everyone, it isn't a void advancement pill that's in my hand. Not a void advancement pill? For a moment, the people in the hall were all stupefied. Not a void advancement pill? Then what medicinal pill was it? Under the gazes of everyone present, the old man slowly spoke. The pill bottle in my hand has one origin strengthening pill within it. Origin strengthening pill? For a moment, all the people in the hall were dumbstruck. Origin strengthening pill again? And only one? However, this time, no one made a fuss about it again. After all, with the 10 origin strengthening pills with 75% purity earlier, they were mentally prepared. Everyone surely thinks it's weird. Why would our Ma Clan auction house make an origin strengthening pill as the final auction item? Speaking up to this point, The old man stopped for a moment, sufficiently holding them in suspense. This old man is quite professional in directing an auction. In room number 1, Duan Ling Tian looked at the old man through the window and shook his head with a smile. Li Fei and Ku Er couldn't help but nod in deep agreement. If it wasn't for them knowing what the old man would say next, they might have been held in suspense by the old man as well. Finally, the old man spoke with a voice that had a trace of excitement mixed within. Everyone, I can guarantee to all of you, the value of this origin-strengthening pill is absolutely not inferior to a void advancement pill. Hurry up and be straightforward. I even thought you were going to say it earlier, but who knew you were holding us in suspense again? The old man's actions had obviously caused public rage. The old man laughed embarrassedly, then he took a deep breath and his face went serious as he solemnly said, "Guests, what I said earlier wasn't nonsense. This origin-strengthening pill in my hand, not to mention you wouldn't be able to find a second in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even throughout the entire Darkhan dynasty, you might not be able to find a second. Because, after the testing and verification of Lord Hu Jun, the purity of this origin-strengthening pill has attained an unprecedented 91%. As the old man finished speaking, he himself got excited. Bang! A tossed stone raised 1,000 ripples. Instantly, the entire hall was stirred, and at least half the people shuddered and instinctively stood up from their seats. An origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91%? How could this be possible? Even a medicinal pill with a purity at 80% or above is an existence of legend. This origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% is practically impossible to exist. If it's real, the value of the origin-strengthening pill is indeed something that the void advancement pill can't compare to. Of course, even though void advancement pills are valuable, they frequently appear in the auctions of the various large auction houses of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City. But this origin-strengthening pill, not to mention its purity, is above 90%. Even if its purity was above 80%, something like that has never appeared before in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's history. This origin-strengthening pill has an extraordinary significance. After a burst of excitement, the group of people that stood up sat back down. Can you let me take a look at this origin-strengthening pill? Right at this moment, an aged voice sounded out from a room on the second floor. Subsequently, under the gazes of everyone present, a person directly jumped out of the window and descended onto the auction platform. This was an old man in green clothes. The old man's gaze was brimming with vigor, and he had an extraordinary bearing as he stood there. Grade 7 Alchemist? Duan Ling Tian's eyes were sharp, and he noticed the Alchemist Guild badge on the old man's chest at the first possible moment. This badge precisely belonged to a Grade 7 Alchemist. Grade 7 Alchemist. In next to no time, many other people identified the old man's identity and exclaimed in low voices. The green-clothed old man looked at the old man that directed the auction and slowly said, "I'm the alchemist that has just been sent to Black Wind City by the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Alchemist Guild's main guild. In another few days, I'll complete the takeover from the acting guild master of the Black Wind City's Alchemist Guild and become the new guild master." As soon as the green-clothed old man finished speaking, the hall went into an uproar again. So it turned out that this green-clothed old man was a member of the Alchemist Guild. Moreover, it's the new guild master for Black Wind City's Alchemist Guild. After all, since 3 years ago, after the Black Wind City's Alchemist Guild's guild master, a Grade 7 alchemist, died from an accident, the guild master position of Black Wind City's Alchemist Guild was assumed by a senior Grade 8 alchemist. No one had imagined that after 3 years, the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Alchemist Guild's main guild would send someone over. So it's the guild master. The old man who directed the auction respectfully bowed to the green-clothed old man. Then he passed the pill bottle in his hand over. He wasn't worried that the green-clothed old man would forcefully seize this origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. On the day their Ma Clan auction house held an auction, there would be 3 half-step void stage powerhouses guarding the auction. Unless you had a void-prying stage powerhouse backing you up, don't think about having any ideas in their auction house. The green-clothed old man poured out the origin-strengthening pill, then he carefully examined it. Before long, his figure lightly trembled, and he said in disbelief, "Really? It's really an origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. The green-clothed old man took a deep breath before returning the origin-strengthening pill to the old man that directed the auction, and he said, with an anxious tone, "Can you tell where the person who placed this origin-strengthening pill for auction is?" "Guildmaster, I'm sorry. Our Ma Clan auction house maintains complete secrecy towards the identity of every guest in the rooms." The old man who directed the auction shook his head. The green-clothed old man nodded. Then he once again flew back into his room. And at the same time, his voice sounded out once again. "I'm determined to obtain this origin-strengthening pill. I hope that everyone can give me some face." However, no one paid any attention to him. But along with the appearance of the green-clothed old man, practically everyone present was able to confirm that the origin-strengthening pill of 91% purity that was being auctioned now was real. On the auction platform, the old man continued, "I presume that everyone is clear in their hearts about what an origin-strengthening pill of 91% purity represents. If an alchemist used this as a blueprint to conduct research, he might be able to pry into the profound secrets of its high purity and obtain a great benefit from it. Moreover, even if you buy such a medicinal pill as a valuable collectible, it's still a unique item. If you offer it to those large sects, or even the imperial family, you'll even have the opportunity to obtain benefits that are hard to imagine. I won't talk any more nonsense. The starting bid for this origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% is 1 million gold. In the end, the old man spoke in a clear voice and started the bid. And right at this moment, the entire hall was deathly silent. Even the rooms on the second floor had all gone silent without any movement. In room number 1, Li Fei was stupefied as she looked at Duan Ling Tian. "Scoundrel, is this Ma Clan auction house intentionally not wanting you to sell off this origin-strengthening pill? Is he mad? 1 million gold. For only a mere origin-strengthening pill, how would anyone possibly?" Li Fei never finished what she was saying, because her beautiful pupils couldn't help but constrict. Because a voice had interrupted her. 5 million gold, 5 million gold. An aged voice sounded out, and it broke the peace in the auction hall. Li Fei's expression froze for a second, and she had a face full of disbelief. Ku Er was stupefied as well, and she had a burning gaze that was filled with adoration when she looked at Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian was startled as well. He was able to discern that the owner of this was precisely the green-clothed old man from before, the grade 7 alchemist that was soon to become Black Wind City's Alchemist Guild's guild master. 5 million gold? This price had already completely surpassed the infant jade-eyed heavenly mouse. The first thought in Duan Ling Tian's heart was, "I've earned back the money I spent on the jade-eyed heavenly mouse." The second thought was, "I can be considered to have experienced the meaning of items are precious when they are rare." As expected, the old man's bid caused a stir in the auction hall. That guild master directly bid 5 million gold? Even though he's a grade 7 alchemist, he ought to not have that much money, right? Didn't you hear of his identity earlier? An origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% has an extraordinary significance to the Alchemist Guild as well. He's surely thinking of using the wealth of the Alchemist Guild to bid for this origin-strengthening pill. Everyone present was shocked by the green-clothed old man's massive bid. I wonder if anyone will continue to bid? Many people couldn't help but think this in their hearts. Finally, 6 million gold. That sonorous voice from room number 7 echoed out once again. Room number 7 again. Who the heck is in room number 7? Too terrifying, casually bidding 6 million gold like that. The voice from room number 7 once again caused a stir in the hall. 7 million gold. Right at this moment, the voice of the green-clothed old man sounded out again, and at the same time, he said, with a deep voice, "Sir, I hope you can give out Alchemist Guild some face." Let's rely on our own ability. The sonorous voice sounded out once again from room number 7, not giving a shred of face to the green-clothed old man. 8 million gold. The room that the green-clothed old man resided in went quiet, and he didn't bid anymore. Seemingly, the price had already passed the value of the pill in his heart. The guest in room number 7 has bid a price of 8 million gold now. Are there any other guests who want to continue bidding? 8 million gold going once. 8 million gold going twice. The voice of the old man on the auction platform was excited as he spoke. The guest in room number 1 has given up again? Seems to be so. He doesn't want such a good item? Voices of surprise echoed out within the hall, one after the other. 8 million gold going thrice. Deal. Along with the old man's voice sounding out, the origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% had become the property of the person in room number 7. In room number 1, Duan Ling Tian started laughing. An origin-strengthening pill that cost 1,000 or so silver was actually sold for 8 million gold, and in silver it would be 800 million silver. Even if he deducted the cost of the jade-eyed, heavenly mouse and silver firegrass from before, he'd still earned over 4 million gold. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Li Fei felt as if she was dreaming. Young master, they're still wondering why you didn't fight for it with the person from room number 7. Ku Er looked at Duan Ling Tian and playfully stuck out her tongue. Fight for it? Duan Ling Tian laughed. That was an item he placed on auction. In next to no time, the attendant knocked the door again. The Ma Clan auction house's manager, Ma Qin, appeared once again, and he passed the 8 million gold to Duan Ling Tian. Congratulations, guest. Ma Qin's heart was bleeding. The 10% administration fee? Gone. Just like that. 8 million gold. Even if it was only a 10% administration fee, it would still be 800,000 gold, which was equivalent to 80 million silver. Duan Ling Tian looked at Ma Qin and asked, how do we leave? Guest, we have provided a special passage for every guest in the rooms. You, lead the guests out? Ma Qin looked at the attendant and instructed. Yes. The attendant hurriedly nodded. Then he led Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 out of the room and turned into the special passage that was at the side of the room. As for Ma Qin, his eyes flashed, then he gritted his teeth, seeming to have made a difficult decision. In next to no time, Ma Qin left room number 1 and walked into room number 7. In room number 7, a dignified middle-aged man sat there, and behind the middle-aged man, another 2 old men followed. The dignified middle-aged man's sonorous voice sounded out when he saw Ma Qin come in. Manager Ma, have you considered it? I only want that gold for a mouse. The other things are yours. That person is able to pay nearly 4 million gold in one go. So he is obviously someone that doesn't lack money. The corners of Ma Qin's mouth twitched when he heard this. That violet-clothed young man naturally doesn't lack money. Not to mention the wealth in his possession, even just the money that the origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% sold for was already 8 million gold. As far as he was concerned, the wealth of that violet-clothed young man would absolutely surpass 10 million gold. Noticing Ma Qin being slightly hesitant, the dignified middle-aged man continued. If Manager Ma doesn't feel at ease, you may follow behind us. Once we kill them, Manager Ma can directly appear, and you won't have to do anything to obtain all the wealth of that person. Manager Ma, when you let an opportunity slip by, it may never come back. What we want you to provide is only where he went. The dignified middle-aged man glanced deeply at Ma Qin. I hope Manager Ma can quickly come to a decision. Otherwise, once they've left, it will be too late. Needless to say, every sentence that the dignified middle-aged man uttered smashed against Ma Qin's restless heart that wanted to agree. Outside the Ma Clan auction house, Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 walked out in large strides. Then he looked at their surroundings and noticed that before them was a remote alley that was devoid of people. This Ma Clan auction house is rather thoughtful. Leaving from this passage will allow us to completely avoid the coveting of others. Li Fei looked at the surroundings and evaluated. Duan Ling Tian nodded, then walked out in large strides. Let's first find an inn to stay at. We'll leave Black Wind City tomorrow morning at dawn. However, he'd only takes a few steps when Duan Ling Tian became vigilant and stopped his footsteps. Meanwhile, Stone Quan, who was behind Duan Ling Tian, stopped as well and turned around. Who are you all? Along with Xiong Quan's surprised shout, Duan Ling Tian turned around as well. With a glance, he saw the three nearby people. A dignified middle-aged man in green clothes and with an extraordinary bearing. Behind the middle-aged man, two old men followed. The old men both wore gray clothes, and even though their eyes were muddy, they gave out an oppressive feeling. Three half-step void stage martial artists? Relying on his formidable spiritual force and the experience of Rebirth Martial Emperor, Duan Ling Tian perceived their rough cultivation levels at the first possible moment. Towards these three people appearing here, he didn't have to think to know that it was surely because of the Ma Clan auction house. Ma Clan auction house. Duan Ling Tian's eyes flashed with a trace of a cold light. What he hated the most was people who didn't keep their word and stabbed another in the back. Duan Ling Tian's gaze descended on the three people and he asked, in a deep voice, "You're members of the Ma Clan?" "The Ma Clan?" the dignified middle-aged man in the lead said, with a sonorous voice. "Do you think that we look like Ma Clan members?" Duan Ling Tian's face sank when hearing the dignified middle-aged man's voice. "You're the person from room number 7? "Exactly." The dignified middle-aged man's gaze descended on the little gold mouse that lay on Ku Er's shoulder. Then he glanced at Ku Er and Li Fei and a trace of surprise flashed within his eyes. "Kid, today, your wrong was that you shouldn't have bid with me for this gold fur mouse. What a pity for these two little beauties. They're going to be buried with you today. Needless to say, your romantic fortune is really good." Duan Ling Tian came to a sudden understanding. So it turned out that this person had come for the little gold mouse. Gold fur mouse? Duan Ling Tian snickered. He wondered if the middle-aged man knew the true identity of the little gold mouse. What sort of expression would the middle-aged man have if he found out? Maybe the middle-aged man would go wild with joy. "Are you that sure that you can kill me?" Duan Ling Tian looked at the dignified middle-aged man with a calm gaze and spoke indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, seeming to have noticed something, Duan Ling Tian's brows rose and his gaze swept out into the distance. He noticed a figure that was concealed in the distance. This figure wasn't unfamiliar to him. The Ma Clan auction house's manager, Ma Qin. Now he'd come to an understanding. It was surely Ma Qin who had come to an agreement with this middle-aged man and colluded with the middle-aged man to sell Duan Ling Tian out. Ma Qin. Killing intent arose in Duan Ling Tian's heart. What? Could it be that you think the four of you and this gold fur mouse can go against us? The middle-aged man couldn't stop himself from laughing when he heard what Duan Ling Tian said, and his gaze when he looked at Duan Ling Tian was as if he was looking at an extremely weak little kid, utterly not taking Duan Ling Tian seriously. "You can try." Duan Ling Tian grinned widely, and the smile on his face was filled with a trace of an evil smile. The middle-aged man frowned when faced with Duan Ling Tian, who was as composed as ever, and he started to be on guard. The two old men behind him started to look around. After noticing that no one was concealed in their surroundings, the middle-aged man looked at Duan Ling Tian, and a sneer appeared on the corners of his mouth. "You aren't thinking that acting deliberately mystifying before me will be of any use, right? Since you want to seek death, then I'll send you off, old Pong." Along with the middle-aged man's voice sounding out, one of the old men behind him flew out as if transforming into a swift cheetah, pouncing towards Duan Ling Tian. Vast amounts of origin energy shook on the old man's body, and above him, 1,500 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared. Half-step void stage. Duan Ling Tian's expression remained unchanged when faced with the old man that approached in full fury, and he slowly spoke with a cold and indifferent voice. "Xiong Quan, I'll give you 2 breaths of time." "Yes, young master." And at almost the same time that Duan Ling Tian's voice sounded out, Xiong Quan replied, then made his move. His entire body instantly disappeared on the spot. Whoosh! An extremely swift sword light flashed by, and the head of the old man that rushed towards Duan Ling Tian fell down. The other half of the old man's body spouted out fresh blood that was dazzling to the eyes, like a fountain. When Xiong Quan appeared once again, he was already in front of the middle-aged man. In the instant that the old man was cut into two, the pupils of the middle-aged man and the other gray-clothed old man constricted, and their faces flushed red as if they were held by the neck by someone, completely unable to catch their breaths. And at the same instant, they were enraged to the point that their eyes were splitting. They only saw an incomparably swift figure arrive before them in the blink of an eye. At this moment, their heartbeats had completely stopped. Whoosh! Xiong Quan raised his hand, and a green sword light flashed by. On the sword light, a mysterious aura intertwined. Advanced sword force. Where the sword lights pointed at, 2 lines of blood whirled out. The middle-aged man and the gray-clothed old man maintained astonished expressions as their figures trembled and then crashed onto the ground without any signs of life. The eyes of the two were opened wide like saucers, dying with everlasting regret. Perhaps even in their wildest dreams, they'd never imagined that there would be such a terrifying existence by the side of the violet-clothed young man that they looked down upon. Void, second level of the void-prying stage. The body of Ma Qin, who was concealed far in the distance, trembled. His expression instantly went ghastly pale as he looked at the 3,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky, and his eyes revealed a sense of panic and terror. He never imagined that the 3 half-step void stage powerhouses would all die in the blink of an eye. And what he never imagined even more was that there would actually be a void-prying stage powerhouse by the violet-clothed young man's side. Moreover, it was a second-level void-prying stage powerhouse. At this moment, his heart was filled with regret. He shouldn't have been greedy. Now, not only was the 10+ million gold that he saw as already his gone, but he had even offended this violet-clothed young man that had a void-prying stage powerhouse by his side. I hope he won't pursue the matter further. Even though the possibility was extremely slim, this thought couldn't help but arise within Ma Qin's heart. Ma Qin, who had a perturbed expression, took a deep breath and silently prepared to leave. Whoosh! However, Ma Qin's face went completely deathly pale when he saw the person that had appeared before him block his path, and his voice trembled. Lord. Xiong Quan stared at Ma Qin with a cold and indifferent gaze and paid no attention to him. The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a sneer as he walked out in large strides to arrive before Ma Qin, and he looked at Ma Qin with a calm gaze. Manager Ma Qin, I trust you've been well since we parted. Put Hong. Ma Qin seemed to have seen a devil when he saw Duanling Tian. He knelt down on the spot and his body shivered. Lord, spare me. I shouldn't have been greedy. I shouldn't have told them of Lord's whereabouts. Lord, I was wrong. Please, I beg you to spare me. Humph. Duanling Tian swept Ma Qin with a cold gaze. Then he called the 2 little girls over before walking towards the Ma clan auction house. Xiong Quan, bring him along. Ma clan, today I'll make you give me an explanation. Duanling Tian's voice sounded out and caused Ma Qin's face to become incomparably ghastly pale. If the clan were to be alerted of this matter, he could imagine his end. What was most important to an auction house was its reputation. And now, for the sake of his selfish desire, he'd acted on his own and single-handedly destroyed the reputation of the Ma clan auction house. Within the Ma clan auction house, all the guests had already left, and only some Ma clan members remained. At the rear of the auction house, 4 old men were gathered there. Geezer who, when you saw that origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% today, you were surely stunned, right? A robust old man in red clothes looked at Hu Jun and laughed. Do you have to ask? An origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91%. However, the luck of the young man is really not bad, being able to obtain such an origin-strengthening pill and earning 8 million gold. A blue-clothed old man nodded, and a sense of jealousy appeared on his face. What a pity, we didn't collect the administration fee from the young man. That's 800,000 gold. A yellow-clothed old man sighed with a face full of regret. Humph. Short-sighted. Selling out the origin-strengthening pill with a purity of 91% also spread out the name of our Ma clan auction house. Are you still worried we can't recoup that mere 800,000 gold? Hu Jun glanced at the yellow-clothed old man in contempt. Your Ma clan auction house still has a reputation to talk about? Right at this moment, a cold and indifferent voice sounded out. It caused the faces of the 4 old men, including Hu Jun's, to go grim. Duan Ling Tian walked in with large strides. "It's you." Hu Jun recognized Duan Ling Tian, and his eyes squinted. "What do you mean by what you said earlier?" "Geezer who's he?" The other three old men looked at Duan Ling Tian and frowned. They were all dissatisfied with what Duan Ling Tian said earlier. Hu Jun let out a breath and said, "He's the guest that auctioned the 91% purity origin strengthening pill." Instantly, the three old men looked at Duan Ling Tian in surprise. "What is the meaning of what I said earlier?" Duan Ling Tian looked at Hu Jun and then said indifferently, "Then I want to know even more. What are the intentions of your Ma clan auction house?" "Xiong Quan, bring him in." Xiong Quan walked in with large strides, and he had a middle-aged man held in his hand. The middle-aged man had a deathly pale expression, and when he saw Hu Jun and the others, his gaze was averting them, vaguely showing a trace of dread. "Manager Qin?" Hu Jun frowned when he saw Ma Qin, who was held in Xiong Quan's hand, and he looked at Duan Ling Tian. "Guest, aren't you going too far?" "Let him go." The red-clothed old man who had an explosive temper glared. Then he took a step forward, wanting to seize Ma Qin from Xiong Quan. Above him, 1,500 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Obviously, he was in existence at the half-step void stage. Hmph! Xiong Quan's gaze went cold. The strength of over 2,000 ancient mammoths exploded out with the raise of his hand, and his origin energy condensed into a palm and then smashed onto the red-clothed old man, blasting him flying. Bang! The red-clothed old man transformed into an arrow that had left the bowstring and fiercely smashed into the wall. Instantly, the entire wall broke into pieces, and a hideous fissure appeared there. Pooh! The red-clothed old man spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face went deathly pale when he gazed at the 2,000-plus ancient mammoth silhouettes that flashed above Xiong Quan. Void prying stage. Not only was the red-clothed old man astonished, but the other three old men, including Hu Jun, all had deathly pale expressions. 3 half-step void stage martial artists. Not bad. Duan Ling Tian's gaze flashed past the three old men besides Hu Jun and examined them before he slowly nodded. After hearing what Duan Ling Tian said, and then looking at Duan Ling Tian's attitude, the three old men were angered to the point that their faces were green. However, when their gazes descended onto Xiong Quan, they suppressed the rage in their hearts. Endure. They could only endure. Not to mention them, even the entire Ma clan would find it difficult to go against an existence at the void-prying stage. Duan Ling Tian wasn't surprised when he saw the old men go silent, as Xiong Quan was sufficient to deter them. Duan Ling Tian's gaze quickly descended onto Hu Jun and he said indifferently, "You asked me earlier if it was going too far?" Hu Jun's face was unsightly, but he still took a deep breath and said, "Guest, I want to know why you did this." "Why did I do this?" Duan Ling Tian's eyes squinted, and he had an awe-inspiring killing intent on his figure as he looked at Ma Qin, who was held by Xiong Quan. "You can ask him." Instantly, Hu Jun's gaze looked at Ma Qin. "Manager Qin, what actually happened?" Ma Qin's face was ghastly pale. How could he say it? Could he say that he was covetous of the violet-clothed young man's wealth and had joined hands to kill the violet-clothed young man and seize all his possessions? Ma Qin. The other three old men were all existences at the half-step void stage and were supreme elders of the Ma clan. Now, their gazes all descended onto Ma Qin. Ma Qin took a deep breath. He knew that he had to speak, and he hurriedly said, "Supreme elders, Lord Hu Jun, this is what happened. During tonight's auction, that Lord Xiaoguang of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company was in room number 7, and he took a fancy to the gold fur mouse that this guest here obtained. When the auction was about to finish, he looked for me and made a promise. So long as I tell him about the whereabouts of this guest, then after he killed this guest, he would only want the infant gold fur mouse, and all the wealth in the possession of this guest would be mine." As he spoke up to this point, Ma Qin's face revealed a bitter smile. Hu Jun and the other old men's faces had went gloomy halfway through Ma Qin's explanation, and when they heard the entire story from Ma Qin, their faces were incomparably gloomy, and they glared angrily at Ma Qin. Ma Qin, as the manager of the Ma clan auction house, not only did you not make a good example of yourself, but you colluded with others to make a move on a guest. Where do you place our Ma clan auction house? Where do you place the clan? Even though Ma Qin hadn't finished speaking of what happened later on, they could roughly guess that the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's Xiaoguang was probably dead. Ma Qin became dejected and despondent, as if he had lost all the strength in his body. He knew that even if the violet-clothed young man didn't kill him, and even if he could escape death, it would still be difficult for him to escape the punishment of the clan. His entire life could be considered to be destroyed. Destroyed by a single word: greed. If the heavens gave him a chance to do it all over again, he wouldn't dare be greedy even if he was beaten to death. But unfortunately, all this was only an extravagant hope, as there was no medicine for regret in the world. Now you understand? Duan Tian's face flashed past the four old men, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. Now, do you still think I'm going too far? The corners of the four old men's mouths held bitter smiles, and Hu Jun took a deep breath. Guest, all of this is the fault of our Ma clan auction house. So long as Guest is willing to minimize the problems and overlook them, we're willing to compensate you. Yes. The other three old men hurriedly nodded. It would be fine if the young man was just ordinary, but the young man had a formidable void-prying stage powerhouse by his side. If they were to truly piss off the young man, not to mention the fact that they would surely die, it would be difficult even for their Ma clan to escape this calamity. Compensation? Duan Tian suddenly started laughing extremely heartily. If there's compensation, everything can be discussed. However, let me say it first, we can minimize the problems and overlook them, but he must die. As he finished speaking, Duan Tian's gaze descended onto Ma Qin's figure. Duan Tian's voice in Ma Qin's ears seemed to transform into a life-taking talisman, causing Ma Qin's face to go deathly pale. Lord, spare me, the culprit, Ma Qin. Duan Tian could imagine that if it wasn't for him having Xiong Quan by his side, then today, he and the two girls by his side would surely be dead. So as far as Duan Tian was concerned, regardless of how the Ma clan's compensation was, Ma Qin must die. And at almost the exact same moment that Ma Qin pleaded for mercy, a blue afterimage flashed past him with a speed like wind, as if it was a ghost. Bang! The blue-clothed old man, one of the Ma clan's supreme elders, attacked out in rage, blasting Ma Qin to death with a single palm strike. The blue-clothed old man looked at Duan Tian and slowly said, even if Guest hadn't said anything, our Ma clan would not allow one who brings disgrace to the clan like this to continue living. Then, let's talk about the compensation. The corners of Duan Tian's mouth curled into a smile, and his gaze swept past the figures of the four old men, causing the old men to feel depressed and helpless. After all was said and done, their Ma clan auction house was indeed in the wrong. Guest, please speak. Hu Jun took a deep breath. He'd already made the mental preparations to pay a large sum in compensation. 10 million gold, Duan Tian slowly said, with a carefree expression as if 10 million gold was nothing in his eyes. Hu Jun and the other old men were instead stupefied. They'd never imagined that the violet-clothed young man before them would demand such an exorbitant price. Guest, this 10 million gold, isn't it too? Hu Jun was in a difficult situation, as even to their Ma clan, 10 million gold wasn't a small sum. If they were to take out so much gold, their Ma clan would surely be greatly weakened. What? Think it's too much? Duan Tian calmly glanced at Hu Jun. Don't forget that today's incident was caused by your Ma clan. 10 million gold, send it to the flowing cloud inn tonight. Otherwise, bear the consequences. After he finished, Duan Tian paid no attention to the four old men with flushed faces and directly left. This time, Duan Tian's group left the Ma clan auction house through the front door. It was late in the night now, and the alley at the door of the Ma clan auction house had quieted down. Only occasionally could some sparse pedestrians be seen. The Flowing Cloud Inn was just a short distance to the front. When Duan Tian walked over to the auction house from the restaurant earlier, he'd seen this inn. Their group walked into the inn. And currently, the Ma clan estate's audience hall was lit up brightly by lanterns. 4 old men and a middle-aged man stood together. At this moment, the middle-aged man's face was extremely unsightly. That Ma Qin actually caused such a disaster. He deserved to die. Ma Qin deserved to die. But Patriarch, that violet-clothed young man asked for 10 million gold. That is really going too far. Are we really going to give it to him? The yellow-clothed old man's voice was low, and it seemed to have slight rage mixed within. Supreme Elder, if we don't give him 10 million gold, will you have another way to resolve the matter? The middle-aged man, the Ma clan's patriarch, had an extremely unsightly expression as he spoke. The yellow-clothed old man was speechless. Did he have a way? No. He didn't consider himself capable of bearing the rage of that void-prying stage powerhouse by the violet-clothed young man's side. I'll order someone to send this 10 million gold to him. However, our Ma clan's money isn't so easy to take. Later, when sending the money over, I'll order someone to send Xiaoguang's corpse to the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Blackwind City. As the middle-aged man finished speaking, his eyes flickered with a strand of a fierce light, and within that strand was a trace of a scheming aura. Patriarch is wise. Instantly, the gazes of the 4 old men, including Hu Jun's, lit up. The Jade Magnolia Trading Company was one of the 7 great trading companies within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and there was no lack of void-prying stage martial artists within it. Xiaoguang was the person in charge of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Blackwind City. And most importantly, Xiaoguang's father was the vice president of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company, and on top of that, his father was also a formidable void-prying stage powerhouse. That night, Duan Ling Tian obtained the 10 million gold that the Ma clan sent over as he wished, and it caused him to be unable to stop himself from sighing with emotion. This money came too quickly. Deep in the night, Duan Ling Tian cultivated as usual. 9 dragons wore sovereign technique, WYRM Python form. Presently, Duan Ling Tian was still stuck in the 3rd level Origin Core stage bottleneck, and he was only half a step away from the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. I ought to be able to break through before arriving at the 7-star sword sect. Duan Ling Tian let nature take its course and cultivated until deep into the night before falling into a deep slumber. At dawn the next day, after having breakfast with the 2 little girls, Duan Ling Tian's group departed on 4 Fergana horses, going directly out of Blackwind City. And not long after Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 left, another 2 Fergana horses pursued, following from afar. Humph! After spurring their horses forward and going far away from Blackwind City, Duan Ling Tian's gaze abruptly went cold. When he came out of the inn earlier, he noticed someone watching them from the shadows. In the beginning, he paid no attention to it. Now, when he noticed someone pursuing from far away, Duan Ling Tian's face went gloomy. Duan Ling Tian notified the 2 little girls and Xiong Quan. Then the 4 of them swung down the horse whips in their hands onto the Fergana horses, causing the Fergana horses to speed up and gallop madly. In an instant, they had created more distance between them and the 2 people behind. The 2 people who were following from behind were 2 middle-aged men. When they saw Duan Ling Tian's group of 4 abruptly speeding up to disappear before their eyes, an anxious expression appeared on their faces, and they hurriedly spurred their horses to madly run forward. However, they quickly noticed that after galloping for some time, the road in front of them was peaceful, and they couldn't see the figures of the people they were following. Where are they? The 2 men looked at each other, and both had bewildered expressions. As far as they were concerned, the horses beneath them were Fergana horses as well, thus those 4 people should not be able to create so much distance between them. Are you 2 looking for us? Right at this moment, a voice sounded from behind them, causing their faces to go pale. When they turned their horses around, they saw their 4 targets spurring their horses to walk forward slowly, walking towards them. They noticed the middle-aged man among the 4 sweeping them with his icy cold gaze, and they couldn't help but have coldness arise within their hearts. They could perceive how terrifying this middle-aged man was. Their bodies lightly trembled, and traces of terror appeared in their eyes. Duan Ling Tian looked at them with a calm gaze. Speak. Why were you following me? Duan Ling Tian's gaze went slightly cold when he saw the two of them seeming to be hesitant. If you don't speak, you too can die here today. Instantly, under Duan Ling Tian's gaze, the faces of the two men went pale, and they hurriedly said, Lord, I'll speak. I'll speak. We're from the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Blackwind City. It was our vice president that asked us to follow you. Jade Magnolia Trading Company? Duan Ling Tian's brows knitted. Only now did he recall that the Ma clan auction house's Ma Qin seemed to have mentioned this Jade Magnolia Trading Company yesterday. The middle-aged man that wanted the jade-eyed heavenly mouse seemed to be a member of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company. That middle-aged man and the two old men were all at the half-step void stage, so their status in the Jade Magnolia Trading Company ought to not be low. Why did he send you two to follow me? Duan Ling Tian asked, in a deep voice. Lord, we aren't quite sure of the exact reason. We're only following orders. The two of them shook their heads. Duan Ling Tian's gaze didn't leave them from beginning till the end, and in the end, he noticed that these two people seemed to not be lying. Recalling the middle-aged man from yesterday, Duan Ling Tian asked, Do you two know Xiaoguang? Xiaoguang. The two of them hurriedly nodded upon hearing this. The president of our Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Blackwind City is precisely Lord Xiaoguang. The president of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's branch in Blackwind City? Duan Ling Tian's eyes squinted, as he never imagined that the middle-aged man from yesterday had such a background. It looked like the spatial ring that he casually took from Xiaoguang ought to have quite a large amount of wealth within it. Right at this moment, Xiong Quan looked at the two of them and asked, This Xiaoguang, what relationship does he have with your Jade Magnolia Trading Company's main branch's vice president, Xiado? The two men answered after hearing what Xiong Quan asked. Lord Xiaoguang is precisely the only son of Lord Xiado. Duan Ling Tian noticed that when Xiong Quan heard what the two of them said, he frowned. Scram! If I notice you following me again, you too will surely die. Duan Ling Tian's icy cold gaze swept past the two men, causing the two men to feel a sense of relief and reveal overjoyed expressions before spurring their horses to kick up a cloud of dust, not daring to turn around. Duan Ling Tian noticed something wrong in Xiong Quan's expression, so he curiously asked, Xiong Quan, you know Xiado? Young master, that Xiado is the vice president of the Jade Magnolia Trading Company's main branch, and I've had dealings with him before. His strength was on par with mine when my strength was at its prime, Xiong Quan respectfully said. 6th level of the void prying stage? Duan Ling Tian nodded. That year, when he had just encountered Xiong Quan, he still remembered what Xiong Quan had told him. Xiong Quan at his prime had a cultivation at the 6th level of the void prying stage. Young master, the people from the Jade Magnolia Trading Company were probably following you because of the Ma clan. Should we? Xiong Quan waved the hand sign for killing. A mere Ma clan is nothing. Hurrying on with our journey is more important now. We have to arrive at the 7-star sword sect as soon as possible. If we're late to the 7-star sword sect's outer court disciple test 3 months from now, then we'll have to wait another 6 months. Duan Ling Tian shook his head. Just like he said, he completely looked down upon the Ma clan. If they turned back now and annihilated the Ma clan, it would only be a waste of time. As far as he was concerned, if he delayed entering the 7-star sword sect because of the matter with the Ma clan, then the losses would outweigh the benefits. Yes. Xiong Quan nodded. To him, whatever the young master says, goes. He was only a servant of the young master. The four of them continued to hurry on their journey. Squeak, squeak, at an unknown time. The little gold mouse had awoken from its deep sleep, and after noticing it was on a Fergana horse, it was extremely thrilled. It then jumped onto the head of the Fergana horse and nodded to coo air like a human. It was extremely happy. Hiss hiss, seeming to have been awakened by the little gold mouse. Little Black and Little White poked their heads out from Duan Ling Tian's sleeve and looked at the little mouse. Their gold and silver eyes flickered with strands of bright lights. Squeak! The little gold mouse looked at the two little pythons. Then it actually turned its body around and shook its ass at them. Duan Ling Tian and the two little girls couldn't help but start laughing when they saw the actions of the little gold mouse. Whoosh! Whoosh! The eyes of the two little pythons went cold, and they transformed into two bolts of lightning that flew out, opening their mouths to bite at the little gold mouse. 800 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above each of them. Little black, little white, don't. Ku'er exclaimed in surprise. She wanted to stop them, but it was already too late. Squeak, squeak. The little gold mouse wasn't afraid in the slightest when facing the two little pythons, and it raised its claws to slap out towards them. 1,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form above it. The two little pythons were successively slapped down by the little gold mouse's claws. Although the little pythons weren't a match for the little gold mouse, it didn't dare attack with a killing blow, as it noticed the gaze of warning that Duanling Tian shot at it. Hiss hiss, the two little pythons felt pain, but they were still unwilling and continued to confront the little gold mouse. Little black, little white, come back. Duanling Tian shook his head and laughed. He never thought that these two little fellows were so aggressive. He didn't even react until after they had fought with the little gold mouse. Whoosh, whoosh. The two little pythons returned onto Duanling Tian's hand, but their eyes still stared fixedly at the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse was unwilling to lag behind. It twisted its ass around and swayed its ass at the two little pythons in provocation. That's about enough. Noticing the mood of the two little pythons becoming restless and slightly losing control, Duanling Tian looked at the little gold mouse and frowned. The little gold mouse seemed to be slightly afraid of Duanling Tian, and it obediently lied down. All right, you two little fellows will surpass it sooner or later. You two are younger than it by more than a year. After a year, you two will surely be stronger than it is now. Duanling Tian noticed that the two little pythons were still unwilling to return into his sleeve, so he comforted them. Of course, he wasn't talking nonsense when he said this. Based on his observations of the two little pythons for almost 3 years, their potential was absolutely not inferior to the jade-eyed heavenly mouse, and when they matured in the future, they might become existences comparable to demon emperors. The two little pythons were both variant fierce beasts, and there weren't any records of the two little pythons within the memories of Rebirth Martial Emperor. But based on their recent growth rate, they'd long since surpassed the growth rate of most demon beasts. Hiss hiss, hearing Duanling Tian's comforting words, the two little pythons obediently returned to his sleeve. This caused the two little girls to laugh helplessly as well. The two little pythons and the little gold mouse simply seemed as if they were born to be enemies. That Xiaoguang really let me gain a lot this time. Duanling Tian withdrew the 3 spatial rings. They were precisely the spatial rings of Xiaoguang and the 2 old men. There wasn't much within the spatial rings of the 2 old men, but there was a large amount of wealth within the spatial ring of Xiaoguang. The origin-strengthening pill that he'd refined had returned to his possession, and the light-edge inscription that was inscribed on a ring was there too. He left all these at that because they were worthless to him. Most importantly, there was an entire 20 million gold in Xiaoguang's spatial ring. Now the combined wealth in Duanling Tian's possession had already come close to 50 million gold. Hurrying on their journey at a gallop, after 2 months' time, Duanling Tian's group finally arrived at a city near the 7-star sword sect. This city had an area that wasn't inferior in size to Black Wind City. Duanling Tian found out the name of this city by looking at the 3 words above the city's gate. Black Bamboo City. At the beginning, Duanling Tian still found it difficult to understand why a city would have such a poetic name. And only after he entered the city and saw the black bamboos that were jet black like ink that rose up from the ground that he came to a sudden understanding. So this was the origin of the name Black Bamboo City. Along the way, Duanling Tian saw some people who wore a uniform, green-colored attire. These people were mostly young men and women. The same symbol was embroidered on their clothes. A sword encircled by 7 stars. Duanling Tian looked at Xiongquan and asked curiously, "They're all members of the 7-star sword sect?" Li Fei and Ku'er, who wore veils, looked at Xiongquan as well, and their beautiful eyes had a sense of wondering mixed within. Xiongquan nodded. "Yes, young master. This is the uniform attire of the 7-star sword sect. The 7 stars on the symbol of an outer court disciple's clothes are copper in color. They're silver for the inner court disciples, and gold for the 7-star sword sect elders. Duanling Tian came to a sudden understanding. The 7-star sword sect's test is another half a month away. Let's first look for a place to stay in. Before long, Duanling Tian directly bought a courtyard house. Shtongquan, you can't follow us to the 7-star sword sect, so you'll stay here from now on, Duanling Tian said to Shtongquan. If I have anything I need you to do in the future, I'll come look for you. Yes, young master. Shtongquan hurriedly nodded in a respectful manner. 10 days later, bang! Origin energy rushed out from within Duanling Tian's body. He had finally broken through the final bottleneck of the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage and smoothly stepped into the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. Lightly using strength, 71 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared above Duanling Tian. The strength of 71 ancient mammoths. Compared to ordinary 4th level Origin Core martial artists, he had entire strength of 11 ancient mammoths more. Even if compared to an ordinary 5th level Origin Core martial artist, he still had an extra strength of 1 ancient mammoth. A brilliant smile appeared on Duanling Tian's face. I've finally broken through. After breaking through, Duanling Tian's mood was elated, and he called Shtongquan before leaving the courtyard house with the 2 little girls and finding a restaurant to have a meal. The restaurant was ancient-styled, giving one an extremely comfortable feeling. Duanling Tian brought the 2 little girls to find a table that was beside a window. Then he sat down and ordered some dishes. 7-star sword sect inner court disciples? Duanling Tian's sharp eyes noticed with a glance that amongst the 3 7-star sword sect disciples in the neighboring table, the stars that encircled the sword on symbol of one of their clothes was silver. This young man that was around the age of 25 was obviously a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple. Relying on his formidable spiritual force and the experience of Rebirth Martial Emperor, Duanling Tian could confirm that the strength of this 7-star sword sect disciple ought to be at the 7th level of the Origin Core stage or above. Merely around 25 and at the 7th level of the Origin Core stage or above. Duanling Tian couldn't help but be astounded. As expected of an inner court disciple of a top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, the 7-star sword sect. After all, among the martial artists of the younger generation that he knew of, when they were around this age, the strongest amongst them was the junior marquis of the Divine Might Marquis estate, Nie Fun. However, even though Nie Fun was older than this 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, his strength was inferior. As for the other 2 young men, they were around 22 and 23, and they were 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Their strengths weren't weak either. They were both at the 4th level of the Origin Core stage or above. Looks like even little Fei can only be considered to have ordinary natural talent once she's at the 7-star sword sect, Duanling Tian thought in his heart. Li Fei was 21 this year, and she had broken through to the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage a month ago. Of course, the reason why Li Fei had her current cultivation was because she consumed the high-purity medicinal pills that Duanling Tian refined. Before long, their food had arrived, and Duanling Tian's group of 3 started eating. Squeak, squeak. The 3 of them had only started eating for a while when the little gold mouse sprung out from under Kuer's sleeve. Its green eyes flickered with a strange light as it stared at the food on the table and gulped down a mouthful of saliva like a human. What? You want to eat too? Duanling Tian noticed the little gold mouse's current appeared and couldn't refrain from laughing. The little gold mouse hurriedly nodded. Duanling Tian blinked his eyes and said to the little gold mouse, "Come, roll twice and I'll let you eat." Unexpectedly, the little gold mouse raised its head and showed an arrogant and disdainful expression as it ignored Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian's face sank. This little gold mouse is really intelligent. Duanling Tian could almost be certain now that the little gold mouse was absolutely able to completely understand human speech. And not only that, its intelligence wasn't inferior to a human's. Scoundrel, don't bully little gold. Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duanling Tian. Then she clamped up a piece of meat and put it before the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse picked up the piece of meat and started nibbling on it with gusto. As it nibbled, it looked in anticipation at Kuer. Kuer couldn't help but laugh. She picked up a few pieces of meat and then placed them before the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse nodded in satisfaction. Right at this moment, Duanling Tian heard an exclamation in surprise from the neighboring table. Senior brother, is that a gold fur mouse? This was something said by one of the two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples from the neighboring table. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple couldn't help but turn his head and look at Duanling Tian's table when he heard what the outer court disciple said. The other outer court disciple looked over with a curious expression as well. Infant gold fur mouse? The eyes of that seven-star sword sect inner court disciple lit up, and a flowing light of greed flashed within his eyes as if he'd seen some sort of treasure. Although the greed within the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's eyes flashed by quickly, Duanling Tian still noticed it, but he paid no attention to it. An infant gold fur mouse indeed posed an extremely large temptation to a martial artist below the void-prying stage. So beautiful. Right at this moment, one of the seven-star sword sect inner court disciples noticed the appearance of Ku'er, who had already removed her veil and started eating, and his eyes shone. The other seven-star sword sect outer court disciple looked at Ku'er as well when he heard what the other outer court disciple said, and a trace of a burning gaze flashed within his eyes. Only that seven-star sword sect inner court disciple glanced indifferently at Ku'er, then his gaze once again descended onto the little gold mouse. His interest for the little gold mouse was obviously more than his interest towards Ku'er. Duanling Tian didn't continue to look at those three seven-star sword sect disciples, and his gaze returned to the little gold mouse, then he shook his head and smiled. This little gold is a glutton like little black and little white. And at the moment Duanling Tian finished speaking, a burst of agitated movement occurred within his sleeve. Obviously, it was the two little fellows concealed under Duanling Tian's sleeve that were unhappy when they heard what Duanling Tian said. Duanling Tian shook the two little pythons that were concealed under his sleeve and coiled around his arm and comforted them with a light voice. All right, I won't talk about you two. Only then did the two little pythons quiet down. Suddenly, Duanling Tian frowned, because he noticed that the seven-star sword sect's inner court disciple had stood up and was slowly walking over to their table. He was coming over with bad intentions. This seven-star sword sect inner court disciple around the age of 25 had an ordinary appearance, but a trace of gloominess was vaguely mixed between his brows. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple arrived before Duanling Tian's table and indifferently said, "How much do you want for this infant gold fur mouse?" "I'm buying it." Ku'er's beautiful brows frowned when she heard this. She was slightly unhappy. The little gold mouse seemed to have understood what the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple said, and it glared its jade-green eyes at him while baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. However, with the little gold mouse's fluffy fur, even if it acted fierce, it didn't have any power of deterrence. Green-eyed gold fur mouse? The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's eyes shone, and the first thought that arose within his heart was, I've encountered a variant gold fur mouse. A gold fur mouse, when grown to its peak, would possess a strength at the half-step void stage. If it was a variant gold fur mouse, it could even break through to the void stage and become a demon beast. Duanling Tian noticed the greedy light that arose within the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer as he said indifferently, "Leave. We're not selling it. We're not selling it." What Duanling Tian said caused the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple to be stupefied. Do you know who I am?" The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple looked at Duanling Tian and intentionally lifted up his chest, causing the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple symbol to be completely revealed. "Are you putting on a monkey show?" Duanling Tian frowned and was slightly impatient. "I know you're a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple, but so what about it? Could it be that since you're a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple, I must give up a cherished possession and sell this little gold mouse to you? Putting on a monkey show?" The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's face went grim when he heard what Duanling Tian said, and he said, in a low voice, "Kid, be careful. Misfortune comes from the mouth." When had he even been humiliated by someone like this? As far as he was concerned, This sentence that was similar to a joke was no different from humiliation. Seeing the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple suddenly turning hostile, Duanling Tian swept him with a calm gaze. Then he lowered his head to continue eating, not paying any more attention to him. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple thought Duanling Tian was afraid of him when he saw Duanling Tian doing this, and he sneered. Really a contemptible wretch. He raised his hand as he spoke, and a stack of silver appeared out of thin air. Then he slapped it on the table and said, in a low voice, "This is 100,000 silver to buy your infant gold fur mouse." 100,000 silver? Duanling Tian was stunned. He swallowed the mouthful of food in his mouth. Then he glanced at the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple as if he was looked at an idiot. "I'll give you 1,000,000 silver to get me another infant gold fur mouse. How about it?" Ku Er and Li Fei's beautiful eyebrows lightly frowned as well, and they had faces of dissatisfaction. This seven-star sword sect inner court disciple was really going too far. Right at this moment, the other two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples stood behind the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple and stared fiercely at Duanling Tian. And one of them threatened, "Kid, if you're sensible, hurry and hand over the infant gold fur mouse. My senior brother is someone you can't afford to offend." Exactly. Our senior brother is an outstanding inner court disciple of the seven-star sword sect, and he is an existence that will become a seven-star sword sect elder in the future. If you're sensible, give this infant gold fur mouse to our senior brother. In this way, you might be able to form some good faith, the other seven-star sword sect outer court disciple said to Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian's eyes squinted, and he looked at the two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples. "According to what you two have said, submissively giving this infant gold fur mouse to your senior brother now is my most sensible and wisest choice?" Of course, the two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples said at the same time. "Ha ha." The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a smile, and he raised his hand to grasp the little gold mouse. Squeak, squeak. The little gold mouse nodded to Duanling Tian and bared its claws and brandished its fangs. Then it turned around to look at the three seven-star sword sect disciples. Duanling Tian naturally was able to discern what the little gold mouse meant. The little gold mouse was currently asking him if it could attack and kill these three hateful fellows. Duanling Tian naturally believed that the little gold mouse had the ability, but he shook his head. If these three seven-star sword sect disciples were really killed by the little gold mouse, then he would have really come for nothing this time. At that time, the seven-star sword sect would absolutely not allow him to enter the sect. "Kid, you're sensible." One of the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples saw Duanling Tian shake his head and thought that Duanling Tian was refusing the little gold mouse's request to stay with him, and the corners of that seven-star sword sect outer court disciple curled into a complacent smile. Not only was it him, even the other seven-star sword sect outer court disciple and the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple had the same thought. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's face revealed a smile of victory. He looked at Duanling Tian and extended out his hand. Duanling Tian's brows knitted, and he coldly swept the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple with his gaze and said in vigilance, "What are you doing?" The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's face sank. "Kid, are you playing tricks on me?" "Playing tricks on you?" Duanling Tian was stunned. When did he play tricks on this fellow? "Scoundrel, he thought you were persuading little gold to follow him earlier," Li Fei said to Duanling Tian, as she noticed everything that happened earlier. Duanling Tian frowned and impatiently said, "Look, is there something wrong in your head? Didn't I say I'm not selling it earlier? Hurry up and leave. We still want to eat." "Kid, you." The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's face went gloomy. Then his extended hand fiercely exerted force. Origin energy raged out, and above him, 110 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. 8th level of the Origin core stage. What? You still want to forcefully seize it? A seven-star sword sect inner court disciple can be so overbearing? Duanling Tian's face sank, and his burning gaze stared fixedly on that seven-star sword sect inner court disciple. Meanwhile, The crowd of customers in the restaurant shot their gazes at the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple. A seven-star sword sect inner court disciple is seizing another's things? It can't be. The seven-star sword sect has always been strict and impartial with its rules. They strictly forbid their disciples from using their strength to bully the weak. Didn't this little brother say that this seven-star sword sect inner court disciple wanted to seize his things? The crowd of customers discussed animatedly. When the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple noticed the surrounding gazes, his face sank, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer as he said, in a loud voice, "Kid, you've already sold this gold fur mouse to me. Now you're going back on your word. I'm only taking back my own belongings." So it's like that. Like I said, the seven-star sword sect disciples would not use their strength to bully the weak. One must have integrity. Since you've agreed with someone, then you must do as you say. This young man has gone too far. The customers present came to a sudden understanding, and for a moment, they all stood at the side of the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple and denounced Duanling Tian. Shameless! Li Fei and Ku Er were angered to the point that their faces flushed red when they heard what the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple said, as they never imagined that a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple would actually talk irresponsibly like this. Haha. Looks like within the entire seven-star sword sect, not everyone can abide by the rules of the sect. Duanling Tian laughed. He laughed brilliantly, and his gaze descended onto the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple. Kid, you don't have to give excuses. You've already agreed to sell this infant gold fur mouse to me. Now hand it over. I'll give you a chance. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple stared at Duanling Tian, and dense killing intent flickered deep within his eyes. Young man, since you've already agreed, then hand it over to him. Yeah, as the saying goes, a man is nothing without his word. Integrity is extremely important, and there's no need to lose your life because of this. Young people nowadays are really ignorant. The spectating customers spoke out one by one. Some advised Duanling Tian, and some lectured him. Duanling Tian directly ignored these fence-sitters, talking endlessly when they didn't know anything. Did they really think they were impartial saints? Kid, public rage is difficult to go against. Just obediently hand over the infant gold fur mouse. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple couldn't help but reveal a trace of complacency when he heard so many people helping him denounce Duanling Tian. Exactly, hurry up and hand it over. Otherwise, we'll make you bear the consequences. Kid, be sensible, or else I'll throw you out. The other two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples cooperated as they talked down to Duanling Tian and were on their high horses. Seven-star sword sect? The smile on the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth grew wider. Sure enough, there were black eggs everywhere. Even the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's top sect, the seven-star sword sect, wasn't excluded. These three seven-star sword sect disciples had taken a fancy towards the little gold mouse, so they left no means unused, turning black into white, and for the sake of achieving their goal, they would stop at nothing. Duanling Tian looked at the three seven-star sword sect disciples and indifferently asked, "What if I don't hand it over?" He had a carefree expression. It was as if he didn't take the three of them seriously at all. Actually, he indeed didn't take them seriously. It was only three existences at the origin core stage. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's face sank, and he said, with righteous indignation, "Kid, looks like you're intentionally playing tricks on us." The origin energy in his hand raged restlessly. Everything he said now was obviously providing a basis for his ruthless attack in the next moment. In this way, he would be in the right, and no one would say it was a seven-star sword sect disciple who took advantage of his sect to bully another. And the truth was precisely like this. Hearing what the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple said, the sounds of sighing with emotion sounded out within the restaurant as expected. Young people nowadays are too rash. Not to mention not keeping to their words, they have so many excuses and are so arrogant. Today, he can only blame himself if he's killed by this seven-star sword sect inner court disciple. Exactly. If he dies, he will have died for nothing. After all, he isn't in the right. Voice after voice helped the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple build up the circumstances a step further. You all. How can you all be like this? Young master didn't agree to sell little gold to them at all. Ku'er's beautiful face flushed red when she heard the discussions of the restaurant customers, and she explained for Duanling Tian. Ku'er, it isn't necessary for you to explain to them. They're only a crowd of fence-sitters. Li Fei extended out her hand that was pure white like jade and lightly patted the back of Ku'er's hand. What Li Fei said naturally caused public outrage. Little girl, mind what you say. Exactly. On what basis are you calling us fence-sitters? Could it be that what you mean is that this seven-star sword sect inner court disciple is intentionally accusing all of you unjustly? Is there any need for a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple to accuse you unjustly? The crowd of customers all glared at Li Fei. When had Li Fei ever experienced such a scene? For a moment, she was angered to the point that her face flushed red. She clenched her fist tightly, and her delicate figure lightly trembled. Abruptly, a loud sound echoed out, and the clamorous noise within the restaurant abruptly stopped. It was Duanling Tian who had slapped his palm on the table. Shut up. At this moment, Duanling Tian's face was extremely grim. These people could talk about him, as at most he would just laugh it off. But these people actually dared talk about Li Fei, dared talk about his woman. This was something that he couldn't tolerate. Meanwhile, the gazes of the crowd of customers in the restaurant descended onto Duanling Tian, and most of them revealed sneers, as they were waiting for the seven-star sword sect disciple to teach Duanling Tian a lesson. What? Kid, you're getting angry from embarrassment? The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple had a smile of ridicule on his face. He never imagined that the development of events would actually completely turn towards him. He knew that it was time. Now, even if he attacked, no one would think that he relied on the backing of the seven-star sword sect to bully another. Duanling Tian looked at the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple with a gaze that contained a piercingly cold light. He had already lost all patience in playing with this seven-star sword sect inner court disciple. Xiong Quan, throw all of them out. The three seven-star sword sect disciples couldn't help but laugh when they heard what Duanling Tian said. Even most of the customers within the restaurant couldn't refrain from laughing. Not to mention the fact that the strength of the seven-star sword sect's inner court disciple was shocking. Even if someone had a strength that surpassed a seven-star sword sect inner court disciple, they still wouldn't dare act rashly. After all, doing so would directly offend the seven-star sword sect. The seven-star sword sect was a top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. How could it be something that anyone would offend? However, their smiles quickly froze. Because they saw. Yes, young master. Xiong Quan replied. Then his figure flashed out as if transforming into a gust of wind. At the instant that the smiles of the three seven-star sword sect disciples froze, Xiong Quan attacked out like a bolt of lightning, catching them one by one and directly throwing them out of the restaurant. Bang! 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 Three loud crashes sounded from outside the restaurant, and accompanying the crashes were three shrill cries. The restaurant went deathly silent, as all the customers within were dumbstruck. They weren't dumbstruck by the nascent soul stage strength that Xiong Quan revealed. Instead, they were dumbstruck by the fact that Xiong Quan dared to touch a seven-star sword sect disciple. The seven-star sword sect was famous for being protective of their own. They thought that this middle-aged man would surely meet great disaster since he dared to touch seven-star sword sect disciples. How would they know that those three seven-star sword sect disciples wouldn't go to the sect elders about this matter? Them being on the right was only a false front. The seven-star sword sect elders weren't stupid and weren't so easy to bluff. Buying an infant gold fur mouse for 100,000 silver? This was already relying on the backing of the sect to bully another. So the three seven-star sword sect disciples fiercely glared at Duanling Tian before leaving with their tails between their legs. Senior brother, could it be that we're to let it go at that? One of the seven-star sword sect outer court disciples had a face full of unwillingness. What else can you do? I never expected him to have a nascent soul martial artist by his side. The face of the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple sank. He originally thought that the infant gold-fur mouse could be easily obtained, but never had he expected that such an unforeseen event would occur. Senior brother, your 100,000 silver seems to still be on their table. Should we go back and take it? The other seven-star sword sect outer court disciple had a flash of light in his head, and he recalled this matter. Why don't you go take it? I'll give you half if you do. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple glared at this seven-star sword sect outer court disciple, causing the latter to have a bitter smile on his face. He didn't dare to make another sound. Damn it! If it wasn't for that nascent soul martial artist being present, I'd surely make that violet-clothed young man die. The seven-star sword sect inner court disciple's face was gloomy as he said this in a deep voice. Suddenly, one of the seven-star sword sect outer court disciple's eyes flickered as he guessed, Senior brother, our seven-star sword sect outer court disciple's test is in 5 days. Do you think they came here for this? According to their accent, they don't seem to be from the area near Black Bamboo City. Right, senior brother, there really is such a possibility. The other seven-star sword sect outer court disciple's gaze lit up. Now that you mention it, there really is this possibility. If you really have come to enter our seven-star sword sect, then you're delivering yourself to me, and I'll surely make you die. The eyes of the seven-star sword sect inner court disciple went cold. He seemed as if he wanted to catch and swallow Duanling Tian, and his icy cold voice seemed to come from a thaw hole that was filled with piercingly cold winds. Within it was a breathtaking killing intent. If he enters the seven-star sword sect, that nascent soul stage martial artist by his side will be unable to protect him. The other two seven-star sword sect outer court disciples started laughing. Within the restaurant, after Xiong Quan revealed his strength at the nascent soul stage, the crowd of customers instantly shut their mouths and went quiet, fearing that they would piss off the violet-clothed young man. They didn't doubt it in the slightest that if they dared to talk too much, based on the violet-clothed young man's temper, he would definitely not hesitate in asking the nascent soul stage martial artist by his side to make a move against them. The violet-clothed young man feared the people behind the 3 seven-star sword sect disciples, and thus didn't dare go for the kill, but he wouldn't fear them. All right, little Fei, don't be angry. Duanling Tian looked at Li Fei, then his gaze went cold as it swept past the customers. How about this? So long as you say the word, I'll ask Xiong Quan to throw them all out right away. Duanling Tian said this in a very casual manner, but in the ears of the crowd of customers, it was like the sound of thunder. When they raised their heads, they noticed the middle-aged man that tossed the seven-star sword sect disciples out earlier looking at them with a burning gaze. Instantly, all the customers were in a commotion, as they directly put down the money for their food and wine, and then left the restaurant as if they were fleeing. In the next moment, only one table of people remained within the restaurant, as well as the dumbstruck manager and attendants of the restaurant. Seeing this scene, Li Fei finally couldn't hold back her laughter, and she laughed charmingly and enchantingly. Duanling Tian couldn't help but be dumbstruck. He wished for nothing more than to push Li Fei down and come down on her to his heart's content. Scoundrel, what are you looking at? Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duanling Tian, and her tone was filled with shyness. Truly an attractive and coquettish little girl. At this moment, Duanling Tian felt his lower regions get hot, and he forcefully endured his urges and took a deep breath. Big Sister Fei, young master has been entranced by you, Ku Er lightly smiled and said to Li Fei, as she stroked the little gold mouse. Li Fei's beautiful face flushed to the point that it seemed as if it would drip blood when she heard Ku Er, and at the same time, she stretched out her hand to scratch Ku Er. Little sister Ku Er, what did you say? Ah, so itchy. Big Sister Fei, spare me. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. Ku Er hurriedly pleaded for mercy. Squeak, squeak. The little gold mouse seemed to turn into a spectator when it saw this scene, and it joyfully watched Ku Er and Li Fei playing. Its pair of jade-green eyes spun as they flickered with a strange luster. Duanling Tian shook his head and smiled, and his mood was slightly better. Seven-star sword sect? Once I, Ku-er, and Li Fei enter it, we will be bound to encounter those three from before. I hope they can be sensible and won't look for trouble with me again. Otherwise, humph. Suddenly, seeming to have recalled something, a trace of a cold light flashed within Duan Ling Tian's eyes. Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, Imperial City. You, what did you say? You said my son is dead? In a spacious courtyard house, an aged old man stared at the middle-aged man that stood before him, and his eyes revealed a dense killing intent. Yes. The middle-aged man's body shivered. The old man that currently stood before him was an existence that summoned wind and called for rain within the Jade Magnolia Trading Company, the vice president of the entire Jade Magnolia Trading Company, Xiado. An existence at the 6th level of the void-prying stage. Enraged, a terrifying pressure was emitted from Xiado and enveloped the middle-aged man, causing his breathing to become difficult. Guang! Xiao exclaimed grievously, and his muddled eyes instantly emitted a bright light that flickered with a scarlet-red killing intent. The middle-aged man's face went pale as he felt the aura being emitted from Xiaodo's body growing larger and larger, and he gritted his teeth as he endured. He believed that if this were to continue, it probably wouldn't be long before he would collapse on the ground. Finally, the raging aura that stretched out from Xiaodo's body vanished, and the terrifying pressure vanished with it, allowing the middle-aged man to catch his breath and heave a sigh of relief. Speak, what happened? Who killed my son? Xiado looked at the middle-aged man, and his eyes were filled with a dense, cold light that seemed to be waiting to swallow someone. The middle-aged man let out a breath of cold air. At this moment, he had the illusion that instead of a person standing before him now, it was a venomous snake, a terrifying venomous snake that could make one die in an instant. Lord Xiado, the person who did it was an existence at the void-prying stage. The middle-aged man caught his breath and slowly said, "This matter happened after the Ma Clan Auction House's auction 3 months ago." Subsequently, the middle-aged man spoke of everything he learned from Black Wind City's Ma Clan. A violet-clothed young man took out a 91% purity origin strengthening pill. Xiaodo's face sank. When he heard this, even he couldn't help but be surprised. A medicinal pill with a purity of 91%? In the past, in his opinion, this was something that was practically impossible to exist. Now, he couldn't help but be slightly afraid. If that person was able to take out such an origin-strengthening pill, did it mean that behind that person was a formidable alchemist? Perhaps the middle-aged man discerned Xiaodo's fear, and he added, "Lord Xiado, according to the Ma clan, that origin-strengthening pill was something the young man obtained by chance, and he doesn't have any relations to the alchemist that refined that origin-strengthening pill." Xiado heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this, and his eyes contained an awe-inspiring killing intent. "I'll make a trip to the Black Wind City with you. No matter who it is that dared kill my son, even if I have to dig to the ends of the earth, I'll still drag him out." The 7-star sword sect had 7 peaks that stood perfectly straight. The 7 peaks rose straight from level ground, like 7 sharp swords that shot into the sky. These 7 peaks were also called as the 7-star sword sect's 7 great sword peaks. The 7 great sword peaks were named based on the Ursa Major constellation. They were respectively the Dubhe Peak, Merak Peak, Fekta Peak, Migres Peak, Alioth Peak, Mizar Peak, and Alcade Peak. Among them, the Dubhe Peak was the main peak, and it was the most towering sword peak that had a grand, imposing manner. The other 6 sword peaks were spread around the Dubhe Peak, like a host of lesser stars around the leading star, surrounding Dubhe Peak in the middle. Only on this peak are the clouds so deep that one does not know where one is. Duan Ling Tian listened to Xiong Quan's introduction, then he gazed from afar at the 7 sword peaks that had clouds coiled around them. His heart was filled with shock. This was the 7-star sword sect? Young master, there seems to be something stopped the surrounding 6 sword peaks connection to the Dubhe Peak. Ku-er's eyes were sharp and noticed the scene when the clouds and mist cleared away. Duan Ling Tian glanced over when he heard Ku-er. When the clouds and mist cleared away, it could be seen that above the 6 sword peaks surrounding Dubhe Peak was indeed a thing that was similar to a black-colored chain that connected to Dubhe Peak. Young master, it is said that only the main peak, the Dubhe Peak, has a path to ascend the peak among the 7 great sword peaks of 7-star sword sect. The other 6 sword peaks don't possess a path to ascend the peak, so unless one is in existence at the void prying stage, they can't climb the other 6 sword peaks. Xiong Quan spoke of everything he knew. So if you want to ascend the other 6 sword peaks, then you must pass through the main peak and use the chain bridges on the main peak to enter them. Chain bridges? Duanling Tian came to a sudden understanding. So in this way, there's only one path to ascend to the peak of this 7-star sword sect, and that is the path up the Dubhe Peak. The defense of this sect can be called amazing. With only one path, it was completely possible for one man to hold the pass and hold back all the enemy forces. Coupled with the hidden forces of the 7-star sword sect, even if the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial family were to personally come here, they might not be able to obtain any benefit. In next to no time, Duanling Tian's group of 4 arrived at the foot of one of the sword peaks. The part of the sword peak that was immersed in the ground was incomparably precipitous, and one couldn't see the end of it with a glance. Such a precipitous cliff, even a half-step void stage martial artist probably wouldn't be able to ascend it. Duanling Tian couldn't help but be astounded as he sighed with emotion. Before long, Duanling Tian noticed that wasn't just him and the 2 little girls by his side that were sighing with emotion. Many young men and women had gathered here from various places and were pointing at the sword peak. Their discussions also had exclamations of surprise mixed within. Duanling Tian was clear that these people ought to be people who had come to participate in the 7-star sword sect's outer court disciple test. The closer they got to the main peak, the more people they could see. The young men and women that had gathered from all over had seniors following by their sides, and in the end, they gathered beneath the 7-star sword sect's main peak, the Dubhe Peak, the only entrance into the 7-star sword sect. The 7-star sword sect's entrance had a height of 10 over meters, and on it were 4 large words carved exquisitely, 7-star sword sect. This, with just a glance, Duanling Tian was attracted by these 4 large words. Even though he didn't study calligraphy, he was able to discern that these 4 large words were carved by a sword cultivating expert with a single swing of his sword. They were like words of nature that didn't have any flaws. This entrance seems to have some history, Li Fei lightly said, with a tone that had traces of shock mixed within. She'd obviously been shocked by these 4 large words. Allegedly, this entrance existed when the 7-star sword sect was established. These 4 words, 7-star sword sect, were carved by the founder of the 7-star sword sect. As Xiong Quan spoke up to this point, he had a face full of reverence. Rumors say that when the 7-star sword sect's founder established the 7-star sword sect, he was already a void interpretation expert. Void interpretation expert. In other words, an expert that had stepped into the void interpretation stage. Void interpretation expert? Li Fei couldn't help herself from exclaiming in surprise. There are void interpretation experts in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? Xiong Quan shook his head. That's a matter of a few thousand years ago. According to my knowledge, it's already been very long since a void interpretation expert has appeared in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even if it's void initiation experts, there probably aren't more than 50 of those in the entire Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. As he spoke up to hear, Xiong Quan slightly sighed. That time, if Out Boundless Sect had a void initiation expert, it most likely would not have been annihilated by the Black Fiend Sect. Duanling Tian also knew some of the matters of the Boundless Sect from Xiong Quan. The Boundless Sect could be considered a second-rate sect within the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Among the sects in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, sects that could be called top sects ordinarily had 5 or more void initiation stage experts within the sect, and there was no lack of existences at the 4th level of the void initiation stage or above. Below the top sects were first-rate sections. There were ordinarily 1 or 2 void initiation experts within these sects, and the strongest would ordinarily be at the 3rd level of the void initiation stage. Below that were the second-rate sections. They didn't have void initiation experts, and the difference between them and 3rd-rate sects were the quantity and quality of void prying experts. Below the 3rd-rate sects were some unrated sections. These unrated sects ordinarily only had one or two void-prying martial artists, and in terms of strength, there was not much difference between them and the various imperial families of the kingdoms under the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. The Black Fiend sect that annihilated the Boundless sect was precisely a first-rate sect. Duanling Tian looked at Xiong Quan and asked, "The voice transmission jade slip that your Boundless sect's young sect leader left behind asked me to pass it to the Solitary Summit Solitary Old Man, Shang Guanyin. Could it be that Shang Guanyin is an avoid initiation expert?" Xiong Quan slowly said, "Young master, the old man you speak of is the ancestor of our Boundless sect. He was in existence at the 9th level of the void-prying stage over 10 years ago. Later on, he discarded his vexations on worldly affairs and decided to stay alone. As for whether he's broken through to the void initiation stage, it's something I have no way of knowing." As he finished speaking, Xiong Quan had a sighing expression. He didn't carry any hopes. In terms of difficulty, a 9th-level void-prying martial artist wanting to break through to the void initiation stage was far more difficult than a half-step void stage martial artist breaking through to the void-prying stage. Duanling Tian nodded, then he asked, "How far is the Solitary Summit?" Xiong Quan lightly pondered. "If you were to travel by Fergana horse, it ought to take 5 months to arrive near the Solitary Summit." "That far?" Duanling Tian frowned. He originally thought that if the Solitary Summit wasn't far away, he would ask Xiong Quan to pass the Void Transmission Jade slip to Shang Guanyin, and this could be considered as completing the desire of the Boundless sect's young sect leader. Now it would seem that there would temporarily be no need for this. If Xiong Quan left, the round trip would take 10 months. It was too long. When I have the chance in the future, I'll go to the Solitary Summit to look for Shang Guanyin. Duanling Tian made a decision in his heart. He didn't want Xiong Quan to leave for so long. As if there was any urgent matter that he needed Xiong Quan for, wouldn't he be delayed? Moreover, based on Duanling Tian's estimations, even if Shang Guanyin knew of this matter, he might not be able to do anything to the Black Fiend sect. According to what Xiong Quan said, there were 2 existences at the Void Initiation stage within the Black Fiend sect. One of them was even an expert at the 2nd level of the Void Initiation stage. Duanling Tian returned to his senses and then looked around at his surroundings. He noticed that the people that gathered increased as time went by, and these people were all a group of young men and women, with the eldest seeming to be not older than 25. This was the criteria of the 7-star sword sect when recruiting disciples. Below 25. Practically every young man and woman had a senior following by their side. Some of the seniors that followed by the side of these young men and women were even existences at the void-prying stage. At noon, the blazing sun hung high in the sky. 3 people finally walked out from behind the 7-star sword sect's entrance. Among the 3 people, the old man in the front was in the lead. This old man had an emaciated figure and a firm expression, and between his brows were traces of vigor and vitality mixed within. The old man's essence, energy, and spirit were all at the peak, and in some aspects, he wasn't inferior to a young person in the slightest. A 7-star sword sect elder? Duanling Tian's gaze descended on the symbol at the old man's chest. The 7 stars surrounding the sword-shaped symbol were all gold. It was precisely the symbol of a 7-star sword sect elder. 2 young men followed behind the old man. Their ages were around 30, and they were 7-star sword sect inner court disciples. All those who are below 25 and participating in the test, stand over here. The old man had a calm expression as he spoke indifferently. Although his voice wasn't loud, it contained an incomparably large and heavy origin energy that echoed out into the ears of everyone present. "Xiong Quan, you can return. I'll look for you in Black Bamboo City if I need anything." Duanling Tian nodded to Xiong Quan and instructed him before taking the 2 little girls and slowly walking over. For a moment, a crowd of young men and women gathered together. Many young men noticed Li Fei and Ku Er. They were slightly stunned by the peerless appearances of the 2 and only recovered from their shock after a short moment. Then they looked at Duanling Tian, who stood in between Ku Er and Li Fei, with faces full of envy and jealousy. So many people. Ku Er sized up the surroundings for a moment and was slightly surprised. Duanling Tian nodded. The young men and women who were currently gathered together numbered at least 1,000. Meanwhile, the old man spoke again. Now, those that are 20 and below and haven't stepped into the 9th level of the core formation stage, leave. Instantly, a portion of the crowd left in dejection. Those that are 20 to 22 and haven't stepped into the 1st level of the origin core stage, leave, the old man continued. This time, even more people left. Those who are 22 and below and haven't stepped into the 1st level of the origin core stage must leave. Duanling Tian couldn't help but be astounded. In the entire Crimson Sky Kingdom that he previously resided in, one could count with one hand the amount of people that were able to step into the 1st level of the origin core stage when at 22 or below. The 7-star sword sect, as expected of the top sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. The test hadn't even started. It was only the 1st round of screening and it was already so strict. Those that are 22 to 23 and haven't stepped into the 2nd level of the origin core stage, leave. The old man's voice continued to sound out. This time, the faces of many young men and women went ghastly pale. Although they were slightly unwilling, they still obediently left. Those that are 23 to 25 and haven't stepped into the 3rd level of the origin core stage, leave. The old man's voice sounded out once more, and practically everyone was numb to it. Now, after the 1st round of screening, there were nearly 200 young men and women that still remained. Duanling Tian couldn't help but be astounded. The quality of the genius martial artists of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdoms wasn't something that the Crimson Sky Kingdom could compare to after all. There were still so many that remained even under such harsh requirements. The remaining people, follow me, then old man ordered. Then he led the way with the 2 7-star sword sect inner court disciples. The crowd, including Duanling Tian's group, followed behind in a formidable array to ascend the Dubhe Peak. Dubhe Peak, the main peak of the 7-star sword sect. On the way, the old man had a stentorian voice as he slowly said, "I'm the elder in charge of this time's outer court disciple test. You all can call me Test Elder." Ascending the Dubhe Peak now represents being one step closer to becoming 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. However, whether or not you're able to become an outer court disciple will all depend on your own ability. The old man continued, "If you become an outer court disciple, don't slack off. The 7-star sword sect has a rule that if an outer court disciple is unable to pass the inner court test and become an inner court disciple by the age of 30, they will be expelled from 7-star sword sect." The old man's words caused many people to be shocked. An outer court disciple who's unable to become an inner court disciple by the age of 30 will be expelled from the 7-star sword sect? I heard that if one wanted to become a 7-star sword sect inner court disciple, one would at least need a cultivation at the 7th level of the origin core stage. I also heard that even if you have a cultivation at the 7th level of the origin core stage, you might not be able to pass the inner court test. Only with a cultivation at the 8th level of the origin core stage when participating in the inner court test would you be able to firmly pass the test. Many young men and women whispered amongst themselves. Even though their natural talents were good, wanting to break through to the 7th level of the origin core stage, or even the 8th level of the origin core stage, by the age of 30 wasn't an easy thing to accomplish. For a moment, many people felt pressured. Duanling Tian followed within the crowd and only smiled indifferently when he heard the whispers of discussion from the crowd. Scoundrel, breaking through the 8th level of the origin core stage by the age of 30. So I have a chance? Li Fei looked at Duanling Tian and was slightly perturbed. Duanling Tian put his mouth close to Li Fei's ears, lightly blew at it, and said, with a voice that had a sense of agitation mixed within, "So long as you're obedient, I guarantee to make you break through to the 8th level of the origin core stage by the age of 25. How about it?" Big scoundrel. Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duanling Tian, and her beautiful face went slightly red all the way to her neck. Many young men looked at Duanling Tian with gazes of envy that seemed as if they could pierce directly through him when they saw him and Li Fei being so intimate. However, Duanling Tian ignored all these gazes. The nearly 200 people followed behind the old man and arrived halfway up Dubhe Peak. Here was a vast stone platform, and near the stone platform stood many people. Duan Ling Tian's gaze was sharp, so with a glance, he noticed that there were 6 batches of people standing there. 5 of the 6 batches were all led by an aged old man, and behind the old man were another 3 or 4 young men following. These old men were all 7-star sword sect elders. As for the young men following behind them, they were all 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. The other batch of people were all women. Although the 7-star sword sect women's attire was also green clothes, there were differences from the men's attire. It had lesser sturdiness and more delicateness, causing one to feel comfortable when laying eyes upon it, and it wasn't ugly. The person in the lead of the batch of women was a dignified, beautiful woman with a beautiful appearance. She was also a 7-star sword sect elder. Behind the beautiful woman followed 3 young women, and they were all 7-star sword sect outer court disciples as well. Duan Ling Tian and the others followed behind Test Elder and stepped onto the stone platform. Meanwhile, that beautiful woman had already brought along the 3 young women as she walked over with large strides towards Duan Ling Tian and the others. As for the 5 old men, they instead waited on the spot with the people behind them. What's this about? Duan Ling Tian wondered in his heart. However, he quickly found out the answer. Test Elder's gaze swept past Duan Ling Tian and the others. Then he slowly said, "The women amongst you are exempted from the outer court disciple test and will directly become 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Now, all of you follow the Alcade Peak's elder by to head to the Alcade Peak and become disciples of Alcade Peak." What Test Elder said caused all the young men and women that followed him to ascend the Dubhe Peak to be stunned. All the young women's faces revealed pleasant surprise. Exempted from the test? Directly become 7-star sword sect outer court disciples? All the young men were dumbstruck. Even this is possible? Absurd thoughts arose within the hearts of some of the men. They wished for nothing more than to be women. The beautiful woman that came over, the Alcade Peak's elder by, said, with a calm voice that didn't contain any feelings, "Female disciples, follow me. Go on." Duan Ling Tian smiled as he said this to the 2 little girls by his side. Seeing the 2 girls seeming to be hesitant, Duan Ling Tian said, "I'll go look for you too once I become an outer court disciple." The 2 girls only obediently nodded after they heard what he said. Then they walked out with the group of young women. Li Fei and Ku Er seemed to stand out amongst the group of young women. Earlier, during the journey here, due to there being many people didn't see their true appearances. But now, along with the 30-plus women walking out, they instantly attracted the gazes of everyone present. So beautiful. Many men's eyes lit up as they were subdued by Li Fei and Ku Er's peerless appearances. Even the beautiful woman, Elder Bai, her eyes couldn't help but shine when she saw Li Fei and Ku Er, and her eyes had a sense of surprise mixed within. It wasn't that she hadn't seen women with such extraordinary appearance. However, the most hard-to-come-by point would be having an extraordinary appearance and shocking natural talent. So many beautiful women had ordinary natural talent, and at most would only end up being reduced to trophy wives. In next to no time, the beautiful woman notified Test Elder, then she brought along the group of young women to directly leave, obviously returning to Alcade Peak. "I heard long ago that there are only women in the 7-star sword sect's Alcade Peak. I never expected it to be true," a young man that stood nearby to Duan Ling Tian exclaimed in surprise. Of course, allegedly, the female outer court disciples of 7-star sword sect are ordinarily cultivating on Alcade Peak. You can see some female disciples on Dubhe Peak, but those female disciples are all inner court disciples, and their ages aren't young anymore. As a young man finished saying this, his face had a strange expression. "I really am jealous of them for being able to be exempted from the test and directly become outer court disciples." Many people had jealous expressions. Actually, it can be understood, as they're women after all, and women that are able to satisfy Test Elder's earlier screening conditions could already be considered to be hard to come by. Directly becoming outer court disciples is reasonable, another person said. What the latter said also obtained the agreement of most of the people present. Women were born weaker than men. Duan Ling Tian's gaze was on Ku Er and Li Fei the whole time until they followed the Alcade Peak's elder by to ascend higher up Dubhe Peak and disappear before his eyes. Only then did he withdraw his gaze. Meanwhile, the remaining 150-plus young men, including Duan Ling Tian, accompanied Test Elder to arrive at the center of the platform. Test Elder abruptly turned around and then looked at Duan Ling Tian and the others. The group of people stopped their footsteps upon seeing this. Only 100 people amongst all of you will remain in the end. In other words, 53 people will be eliminated. Test Elder's burning gaze flashed past the group of young men, causing many young men who were already slightly perturbed to go pale. Now there were precisely 153 people amongst them. In other words, more than one-third would be eliminated. I wonder what test it will be, Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart. He was slightly curious and slightly in anticipation. Duan Ling Tian still had 100% confidence towards passing the test, so he wasn't worried. Duan Ling Tian's face went grim. Suddenly, he noticed that a formidable aura instantly enveloped down towards them from Test Elder, pressing down on the group of young men, including Duan Ling Tian. This formidable aura belonged to a void prying stage expert. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary void prying stage expert's aura. This Test Elder is actually in existence at the 7th level of the void prying stage. Duan Ling Tian was shocked in his heart. As for Test Elder's aura, it couldn't pose much of an effect to him. After all, his spiritual force was comparable to a nascent soul martial artist. And not to mention this, just the tenacity of his will wasn't something that an ordinary person could compare to. He was someone who had experienced 2 lifetimes. Duan Ling Tian quickly noticed that due to being caught off guard, over 10 young men had instantly collapsed on the ground. These young men that collapsed on the ground found it difficult to stand up again and lay there with shivering bodies. To them, the imposing manner of a 7th-level void prying stage expert was too strong. Before long, Duan Ling Tian noticed that many people had collapsed. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. In the sky, ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form one by one. It was the remaining young men reacting to the situation and circulating their cultivation to defend against Test Elder's imposing manner. For a time, the sky was filled with dense ancient mammoth silhouettes, and it was utterly impossible to see clearly which ancient mammoth silhouettes belonged to who. Bang! In next to no time, another young man collapsed and was frothing in his mouth. Time slowly passed by. Only 127 young men currently still remained standing. Now, practically all the people present had realized that this sudden imposing manner of a void prying stage expert was precisely the outer court disciple test that they had to face. The 10-plus people that collapsed first all lied there on the ground with faces full of bitterness and helplessness. They knew that they were bound to have no fate with the 7-star sword sect. Among the 127 people that remained standing, only a portion of the people were stable like Mount Tai. The figures of most people were trembling and would collapse at any moment. They gritted their teeth and persisted, because they knew that so long as another 27 people collapsed, and so long as they didn't collapse, they would pass the test. So boring. Duan Ling Tian stood in the crowd and yawned as he lazily stretched his body. A young man just happened to be standing behind Duan Ling Tian. The young man originally gritted his teeth and tried his best to forcefully hold on. However, when he saw the leisurely and carefree Duan Ling Tian before him lazily stretching, he couldn't hold on any longer, and he lost his focus. Then his body trembled before crashing onto the ground. The sound from behind startled Duan Ling Tian, and he turned around to take a look. The young man that had collapsed on the ground had a face covered in bitterness, and when he noticed Duan Ling Tian turning around, his eyes nearly went black and passed out. Oh my God! What did he see? The young man that stood before him was actually a young man that wasn't even 20. He suddenly felt that he'd wasted his life for all these years. Duan Ling Tian noticed the young man that had collapsed on the ground staring at him and couldn't help but ask in wonder, "Friend, are you all right?" The young man opened his mouth when he heard Duan Ling Tian, but in the end, he didn't say anything. The imposing manner of Test Elder enveloped them, causing it to be difficult for him to speak. In his heart, only one thought remained. Abnormal. This violet-clothed young man is simply abnormal. Bang, 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 bang. After half an hour, one by one the young men collapsed onto the ground, and only 100 young men still remained standing. Meanwhile, the imposing manner of Test Elder was withdrawn. Duan Ling Tian looked around at his surroundings. He noticed that amongst the young men that were standing, some of them had similar ages to him, and the cultivation of these people hadn't yet broken through to the origin core stage. They obviously could hold on because of their shocking will. A test like this is really interesting. It's direct enough and straightforward enough. Duan Ling Tian secretly thought in his heart. Along with the withdrawal of Test Elder's imposing manner, everyone instantly felt the pressure on their bodies lessen, and brilliant smiles hung upon the faces of the people who still remained standing, whereas the 53 people who were collapsed on the ground all had bitter smiles and helpless expressions. You two, take them down the peak. Test Elder instructed the two 7-star sword sect inner court disciples behind him. Yes. The two 7-star sword sect inner court disciples brought the 53 people who had just stood up with difficulty to leave. These 53 people could be considered to have come here for nothing. Congratulations to all of you for becoming outer court disciples of our 7-star sword sect. Test Elder's gaze flashed past all 100 young men, including Duan Ling Tian, and he slowly said, "Now, I'll roughly introduce our 7-star sword sect to you. Our 7-star sword sect is divided into 7 great sword peaks, and the Dubhe Peak is the main peak amongst them. The cultivation locations in the main peak belongs to the 7-star sword sect higher-ups and the inner court disciples. Outer court disciples cultivate on the other 6 peaks. Among the outer court 6 peaks, the Alcade Peak is the cultivation location for the outer court female disciples. The other 5 peaks are the cultivation locations for the outer court male disciples." Speaking up to this point, Test Elder continued. "Now, the elders of the other 5 peaks and the inner court disciples they brought along will each choose 20 people from amongst you in the future. All of you will be the outer court disciples of the peak that the elder who choose you is from. As for other details and introductions, the elders of each peak will give all of you a detailed account. Alcade Peak, the cultivation location for the female outer court disciples?" Duan Ling Tian shook his head with a smile. That was no different than a kingdom of women. Meanwhile, under the instructions of Test Elder, the other elders of the other 5 peaks brought along the disciples behind them and walked over in large strides. When these people came close, Duan Ling Tian noticed a familiar figure. Duan Ling Tian never expected that he would encounter this person here. Among the 3 outer court disciples behind an old man that had a goatee, one of them could be considered to be an old acquaintance of Duan Ling Tian. It was precisely one of the 3 7-star sword sect disciples he'd encountered in the restaurant 5 days ago. One of the 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. Because of the far distance between them earlier, Duan Ling Tian didn't notice this person. In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian noticed that this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple had noticed him as well, and not only that, this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple didn't seem surprised when he noticed Duan Ling Tian, as if he'd known of Duan Ling Tian's existence since long ago. Perhaps when Ku Er and Li Fei left with the Alcade Peak's elder Bai, he'd already guesses that I was here, Duan Ling Tian thought, secretly in his heart. Meanwhile, the elders of the other 5 peaks had already arrived before them with the outer court disciples behind them. Duan Ling Tian noticed that the outer court disciple he had enmity with directly charged towards him. The outer court disciple had a smile of victory on the corners of his mouth as he threw a small command token to Duan Ling Tian. "In the future, you're an outer court disciple of our Migres Peak." Duan Ling Tian's brows knitted as he caught the command token, and when he looked carefully, he noticed that this was the command token of the 7-star sword sect's Migres Peak's disciple. A smile of mischief appeared on the face of this 7-star sword sect outer court disciple. Then he looked at Duan Ling Tian and inclined his body forward to come close to Duan Ling Tian, and he said, in a low voice, "Kid, I never expected to encounter you here. Enemies really are bound to meet. I'm truly curious, without that nascent soul martial artist to rely on here, will you kneel before me and plead for mercy?" "Kneel and plead for mercy?" Duanling Tian couldn't refrain from bursting out into a laugh when he heard what this outer court disciple said. In the blink of an eye, Duanling Tian withdrew the smile from his face and put an expressionless face as he crossed eyes with the outer court disciple. Then he slowly said a word. Idiot. You. This seven-star sword sect outer court disciple never imagined that Duanling Tian would still dare to be perverse before him now. His face instantly sank, and he gnashed his teeth. Kid, you'll regret it. Duanling Tian yawned, then paid no further attention to this outer court disciple. He walked over to the old man with the goatee, the elder of Migres Peak. Meanwhile, the Migres Peak had chosen the allocated 20 people. I'm Lu Qiu, the outer court elder of Migres Peak. In the future, all of you can address me as Elder Lu, the old man with a goatee said to the 20 new outer court disciples. Elder Lu. Instantly, many people took the lead to greet him, as they were thinking of getting familiar with Elder Lu. All of you have just entered the sect and don't know of many things. I'll take all of you back to Migres Peak now. I and these 3 senior brothers of yours will explain the things you need to pay attention to in the 7-star sword sect on the way. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Qiu brought Duanling Tian and the others to continue ascending Dubhe Peak. On the way, Lu Qiu's voice sounded out. Since all of you have entered the 7-star sword sect, you must abide by the rules of 7-star sword sect. Disciples of the 7-star sword sect must not use their strength to bully the weak. This is the thousands of years old decree of the sect since its establishment. Besides that, unless on the life and death arena, sect disciples within 7-star sword sect must not kill each other. Violators will be severely punished without mercy according to the rules of the sect. As he finished speaking, his tone had a sense of coldness within, causing chills to run down one's spine. Elder Lu, what's the life and death arena? Instantly, one of the outer court disciples that had just entered 7-star sword sect couldn't refrain from asking. Lu Qiu looked at one of the outer court disciples beside him. Hua Xian explain it? Yes. The person that Lu Qiu called upon wasn't anyone else. It was precisely that 7-star sword sect outer court disciple that was enemies with Duanling Tian. However, before Lu Qiu, Hua Xian was reverent and respectful and didn't dare be inattentive in the slightest. Hua Xian's gaze descended onto the group of 7-star sword sect outer court disciples that had just entered the sect, and when his gaze flashed past Duanling Tian, it seemed to have a strand of a cold light mixed within. Of course, when this cold light flashed by, only Duanling Tian, the target of the coldness, was able to notice it. Hua Xian? The corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a sneer. He was disdainful towards the cold light that flashed within Hua Xian's eyes. As far as he was concerned, this Hua Xian was nothing more than a clown. The life and death arena is an extremely special existence in our 7-star sword sect. Every one of the 7 great sword peaks of 7-star sword sect has their own life and death arena. This life and death arena is the place where disciples vent irreconcilable enmities. Once one enters the life and death arena, it is equivalent to putting one's own life as a wager. Entering the life and death arena also means that the enmity won't end until one of the parties die. The life and death arena is the one and only place within our 7-star sword sect where one doesn't have to take any responsibility for killing someone. Hua Xian slowly spoke. As he finished, his gaze once again descended onto Duanling Tian's figure, and there was no lack of provocation within it. As if he was asking Duanling Tian, "Do you dare enter the life and death arena with me?" In next to no time, Hua Xian noticed that Duanling Tian hadn't looked him in the eye from the beginning until the end, and this caused his face to go even gloomier. When was he ever ignored by someone like this? More importantly, the person that ignored him was an outer court disciple that had only just entered 7-star sword sect. Kid, I'll make you die sooner or later. Dense killing intent arose within Hua Xian's heart. The current him wasn't purely wanting to get back at Duanling Tian for the loss of face in the restaurant 5 days ago. In his heart, he'd already completely hated this violet-clothed young man. Along with Hua Xian finishing his speech, besides Duanling Tian, who was still composed, all the outer court disciples who had just entered the 7-star sword sect more or less experienced changes in their expressions. and some of them were terrified to the point that their faces went ghastly pale. Life and death arena. No end until one party dies. No need to take responsibility for killing someone. The corners of Duan Ling Tian's mouth curled into a smile. This life and death arena was really a great place. Of course, Duan Ling Tian was also clear in his heart that the existence of the life and death arena was only capable of restricting 7-star sword sect disciples from killing each other up to a certain extent. Secretly, so long as it's not noticed by another, one can still kill and not need to take any responsibility. The existence of the life and death arena was only to cause the 7-star sword sect disciples to not dare kill another under the circumstances that someone else is present. If no one was present, there would be no difference whether there was a life and death arena or not. Before long, Lucio spoke again. After all of you become members of Migres Peak, I hope all of you can bring honor to Migres Peak. So long as someone brings honor to Migres Peak, the Migres Peak will absolutely not treat you shabbily. What Lucio said caused all the 20 outer court disciples who had just entered 7-star sword sect to be stunned. Elder Lu, what do you mean by this? One of the new outer court disciples had a bewildered expression and couldn't stop himself from asking.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.